Hey friends, it's Kevin. Welcome to the Kevin Dairaghi Show. We're gonna have a conversation here with Rob Heyder. You're gonna love him. For me, it was like sitting inside the mind of a CEO. He knew the numbers of the business, like the large scale. I want a third wholesales, a third rentals, a third this. Just like being able to structure that and the strategy and really the wisdom that goes into running a business, benefits and pros of scaling up, right? Whether it's buying more residential houses, whether it's going into commercial. And then also the other part that doesn't get talked about is how to scale down to go along with the market. So just fascinating stuff. I hope you guys will also enjoy our conversation with Rob. And here we go with our guest, Rob Heyder. Rob, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Yeah. So as we actually record this is the first snow day that we've had here in St. Louis. Unexpected as far as I'm concerned. I guess it kind of caught us a little unexpected, but here we are. Fantastic. Rob, is it as magical having a snow day as it once was as a kid?
No. It's actually, I think about this a lot. Like, I remember loving snow days. And, a couple of days ago when we first started getting this big snowstorm, we went out and kids and I had sled and made some snowmen. It was great. Had a great time. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking the about $8,000 to $10,000 I have to pay in snow removal every time it snows.
Oh,
Oh, that's burning me.
so, Rob, when you got started, you started out doing onesie twosie residential houses. Now you're kind of known for doing commercial and special deals and creative financing. We're going to get into more of that, but because you own all these buildings now, like big real estate, this is a real thing. Like right now, my kids are out shoveling snow and playing, sliding down, the hills. Fun for them, right? One of
Yeah.
our traditions is we always on the first snow we have to watch a Harry Potter movie. That's just how it works, right? Do you have any fun traditions on the first snow before we get into the weight of everything behind it?
Not necessarily like that. We always get full decked out snow gear, go out, we play. I've got a pretty big yard and I've got a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old. And we always kind of go out and play in the backyard. The dog's out there running around, living his dream. And then on the playground, there's like a little roof. It's like one of those rainbow playgrounds, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like I don't know, a vinyl roof. And inevitably, like, it's who can get to the top fast enough as the other person's trying to climb up the fake rock wall deal without getting the roof popped on you and all the snow dumping on you. So
King of the
inevitably, like, that's the thing every year that's like, all right, who's going to get it dropped on them? It's like King of the Mountain. So that's kind of funny. That's one of our biggest kind of just snow related traditions. And then typically I get the kids and I out there shoveling the entrances and stairs and whatnot. So trying to make them work a little bit for it.
That's right. I mean, there's not too many ways that a 10 and 13-year-old can make money. Cutting grass and snow removal happen to be some of the bigger ones. Uh,
Yeah. Man, growing up, I shoveled so much. I loved when it snowed. I made so much money. And then my dad owned a small construction company. Um, and he would go out and plow and then I would go with him for like 20 hours straight and then shovel all the walks, which paid quite a bit more than shoveling driveways. So that was a little bit of a boost on that front. So it
because
was I used to love when it snowed because I could just see the money. One of the fastest ways to make money as a kid.
so where's the walks? Did you get paid more because it was a commercial job or?
Yeah, absolutely. And because yeah, we would go down, he'd trying to think. He had like the contract for like all the what's the Old Town buffets and what's the one that's been in the news a ton recently because I tried to change the logo of it.
Oh, Cracker Barrel.
Cracker Barrel, yeah, all the Cracker Barrels. So if you're shoveling driveways back then, you might make 15 or $20, but you kind of got paid per commercial building. And yeah, for shoveling walks on a commercial building, it cost you a hell of a lot more than $20. So I would get a larger cut of that. So it made it worthwhile. And then speed's the game. So it's how many can you do, and kind of bounce around to the next one.
And that said, it's ironic that we started complaining about it now. So, do you think it's some dad and his kids are out there on your buildings cleaning them up?
They might be. The problem is trying to find the dad and the kids to hire at scale is difficult. So you end up hiring a snow removal company, and
Mhm.
they typically will sub out to all of those folks. So I would love to get a dad and their kid. I'd feel so much better about it, but inevitably that's not the case. And every time you're always kind of negotiating the bill because they're always throwing BS in. I've got a couple good groups, but with as spread out as our stuff is, we've got a good group, but they won't go into deep South City, for example, or deep South County, but they'll do mid county down to St. Charles County and vice.
Mhm.
So we typically have to hire like 3 different companies to hit all the different stuff. And inevitably you'll get 1 or 2 good groups, and then the other group will try and rob you. Last year we got decimated. Whereas there was that big snow for St. Louis viewers. It was right around New Year's, and it snowed like 8 inches, and it was icy. And then it got super cold, and it snowed again with ice. And I had a group that tried to bill me, like, one of our office buildings about 21,000 feet, about 80 parking spots, and they billed us like $14,000 for 4 days of snow removal. So I'm actually still fighting that one out from a year ago.
Yeah.
So it's just always something. And then inevitably, somehow, some pipe bursts. We had a big commercial building that about 3 or 4 years ago in St. Louis, it got down to like -25. It was right around Christmas, and the HVAC room in the parking garage had like a louvered door set to allow air in for all of the big commercial HVAC systems in the boiler. And the louvers froze open, and that -25-degree air got in there, and it froze the main water line coming in, like a 5-inch pipe, and the main line that went into the fire suppression system. And it burst that, sprayed everywhere, ruined the control panels for all the HVAC room. I mean, it was like a $250,000 thing. Now, fortunately, after about 5 months of fighting it, the insurance covered it, but it was a mega issue. And then furthermore, I don't know if you remember, but that was 22 or 23 is when that occurred. Um, but that was that window where HVAC systems were severely back ordered. So we actually, and a lot of the components kind of coming out of COVID when there was a shortage of supplies, it took us 3 or 4 months to get the components that were necessary to get that building back live. It was a major issue.
So, how did everybody stay warm?
They didn't. They had to move out. It was a biotech company too. They were out for probably 4 weeks while we pieced together components with, big commercial HVAC companies and big commercial fire suppression companies to come piece it together enough so that we could keep them warm and get occupancy. But it was probably 4 to 5 months before everything was truly back online like it should be.
Oh, because they can just plug in space heaters because of the smoke, fire suppression, right?
Yeah, there was no fire suppression, so that was a big piece. And then secondly, this is a 25,000 foot building, so like, and doing like biomedical stuff. So their level of need is
A little bit
quite a
different.
bit different. Yeah. I don't think there was plugging in space heaters to solve it wasn't gonna wasn't gonna cut it with that one.
Well, that's why I'm like, you get a handful of tenants. I walk in on some tenants and they don't feel like paying their gas bill. So it's their electrical oven that's wide open or, you know, trying to heat their unit that way. Doesn't sound like biotech units are doing quite that solve.
No, and it was terrible because it fried the because with commercial units, a lot of times you'll have like a motherboard that transmits. You can get your you can control the system via Wi-Fi, and the big HVAC companies, like the management companies, will have access to it, and then in some instances, the property manager, the landlord, will have access to it and whatnot. Um, and so it fried that, so it couldn't, even though there were multiple systems, it couldn't get it couldn't get the brain was down, so it couldn't get transmitting any of the messaging, and it was well. And then now it's still very cold. Now there's no HVAC, no heating, and then we had dealt with just major pipe bursts throughout the building because of that. Even it was a mega issue.
So knowing that happens when you start playing in commercial and do you do light industrial too?
Yeah.
So playing in that world, right, where you put zeros behind any issue that happens in single family houses, right? You know, you're putting zeros behind this. Whenever we have a cold snap, whenever a storm comes through, are you just like gut wrench? Like, do you feel it in your stomach? Do you just carry all the stress waiting for that phone to call with negative news? Like, how does that feel?
A bit. I mean, it 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 it's terrible in the beginning, and then you just kind of figure it out, right? Like it's going to happen. We try like hell and put up more preventative measures in every time to make sure that the issues don't occur. And we were on it very quickly on this one. We were on it, every day. Either my property manager or maintenance guy, one of our business partners or I are out there checking on. I was there yesterday. My property manager and I were on the phone. They're out there today checking on it. That was a super unique instance because it hasn't been that cold for that long, like as long as I can remember. That was like a once in 50-year kind of thing. And the unique level of circumstances that came down to like that caused that were just crazy. Like you couldn't have planned that out. Like that was a perfect storm of bullshit. But inevitably something's going to happen though, and it can be fixed. And the sooner you can get to it, the sooner you can jump on the problem, the better kind of a scenario. Um, but yeah, for the most part, that's it. So it's always there. Something's going to happen, and that kind of just goes back to that point, right? So you got the cost of snow removal and ice removal and sidewalks, and knowing that someone's going to try and make a slip and fall claim at some point. Just it happens, and then you've got these one-off kind of crazy events that can pop up. So you know it'll be what it'll be, and you just know that it could come, and you deal with it and try and put it out of your mind so you can sled and play king of the mountain with your kids in the backyard. But it's coming.
But how do you deal with that, Rob? Like, you know, we have rentals, have our flips and stuff like that, but for the most part, our catastrophic calls are, hey, our HVAC went out, or hey, this happened or this happened. Okay. We could always put somebody over in a hotel. We could always, there's a lot of ways to handle this stuff. But you're talking such scale, but you also have a larger team. Like, are you ever relaxed with this stuff? Or is this all like you're the king of the mountain on these things?
No, I mean, I shouldn't say relaxed, but it's the same, right? Because just like you mentioned, all right, an HVAC goes out, you can put someone in a hotel, you send an emergency group over there, hopefully they can fix it quickly. Maybe you can plug some space heaters in. Like we deal with those problems too, but it's kind of the same. Either you're going to be able to fix the problem or you're not, right? And that was kind of the scenario there. Like it was hectic, and it was, like, oh my God, what are we going to do? How's this going to handle? How long are we going to be out? But you can only really control so many things. So in that instance, you couldn't control it. The only thing we can control is trying to get ahead of it and have the protocols in place so that it lessens the likelihood, and then have the protocols in place so that it's getting touched more often. So if something does occur, we're on it faster, you know, um, and then it's going to be what it's going to be. So, I mean, it's in the back of your mind, but it's kind of the same, right? You just, if you can control it, if you can solve it quickly, great. If you can't, then you got to jump on the problem and solve it. And by doing so, you'll be better, prepared for, the next year, the next issue that pops up. It's literally just like anything else. You learn to deal with it. You learn to put the right systems in place and touch it more. And then just, it's going to be what it's going to be.
So I love that you keep mentioning systems, right? And just to kind of give a clarity for people listening, you run one of the probably what top three, top five home buying companies here in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Meaning like you're doing lots of deals every month. What would you say, 10 plus a month or so?
Yeah. I'd say 10 to, yeah, somewhere in that ballpark. 10 to 12 a month is probably average.
Now that means it's more than you just walking around looking at houses. Like, how big did this team get? How did you find a good number? Like, like you're talking scale, which gosh, there's so many questions in here, Rob. So just pick which one you want to answer. Do you think it was harder doing your first deal, scaling up to 10 houses a month, or going into commercial? Like those are three different worlds here in real estate. What do you think was harder?
I would say scaling up and scaling down is harder because you're dealing with so many humans, right? Like when you're dealing with buildings and different issues, there's only so many variables that you can kind of control. Um, Dealing with humans, it's a lot harder. We scaled up in 21 where we had a sales team of just on the acquisition and disposition side of about 25 folks. I think we did, I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I think we did 425 or 400 and something purchases that year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that year I think we were the largest in St. Louis. We were moving a lot of inventory, big sales force, kind of post COVID boom, hedge funds, private equity, everyone was buying. There's a little bit more kind of systemized selling. You knew who the buyer was and exactly what they were looking for, and you just kind of ramped up the marketing. I think we were spending 125,000 or so a month in marketing spend and just
Damn.
ramming it, right? Maybe even more than that, but and just running it through and rocking and rolling. Then 2022 hits, rates shoot up, market slows, private equity backs out, so then we had to scale down quickly, which is harder than scaling up almost, I think. Um, because you don't know the timing of the market. You don't know, like, hey, is this a blip? Is it not? Who do you have to let go on the team side? What amount of marketing do you need to cut? Like, you got to adequately on the wholesaling side, you got to almost adequately cut your acquisition and disposition team in accordance with the marketing budget to kind of get your arms around it. And if your marketing spends 125,000, you're probably spending about that in just acquisition and disposition payroll, overhead payroll, all the other stuff. So the burn rate's high if you don't fix it very, very quickly. So that's a big variable. And then it's just, it's substantially harder scaling down with burn than it is scaling up with opportunity.
Hmm.
And you're affecting, it's you hiring people. Your biggest issue is you hire the wrong person, which is material. But when you're letting people go, it's, there's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of issues there. You're also kind of worried about the timing. Like, hey, is this a blip? Or private equity? Are these buyers going to come back around? Like, also on the wholesale side of the business, which probably anyone that wholesales knows this, but typically your B2C on the front end, so your business to consumer on the front end, your B2B on the back end. So in a market that's turning against you, in a bear market where the market's turning down, the B2B side is typically more savvy and understands the business and where it's going and is pulling back and being more, and needing to buy, properties at better deals. So the price that they would buy the same house at is going to be less than it was 6 months earlier. But the consumer oftentimes doesn't know where the market is. So their expectations of price is equal to or greater than what it would have been 6 months ago. So you kind of have this negative correlation. You don't know how quickly that's going to correct. And that plays a huge role on making sure that your whole team is adequately paid, or it's scaling down accordingly. And then making sure your marketing spend is aligned with that and which channels to cut in order to produce the quantity to keep the team fed, hoping that you can get deals that have enough premium to offset overhead. So it's an interesting thing. So I would say that's harder than figuring out the commercial side. Commercial side, the other variable is when you're dealing with residential tenants, typically, you rehab a house or you buy one that's close to rehab ready, get it past occupancy inspection. If most markets in St. Louis have that, nationally, that's less common, but get it through occupancy inspection, get approval. Okay, you list it for lease and you get a tenant in there. If you don't get good applicants in 2 to 3 weeks, it's probably because you're overpriced. You make a slight price adjustment, get somebody in there. Like, you have to work pretty hard not to get someone in 30 days. The commercial world is not that at all. I mean, you could have a property sitting vacant for a year or more with lease up, depending on where the market is, right? Especially in office. But just larger the spaces you're trying to lease, the less applicable tenants, the more variables that come into effect. they're trying to make sure that the space is right for their team and the build out. So you might wait 6, 9, 12 months to lease it and then have another 6 months of build out just before you even get them in place. So it's an interesting ball game that you have to be very well prepared for.
And you just have to pay your monthly bill on that regardless.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, it's why we talk about it a lot on the residential side and you make your money on the buy, but it absolutely is the case on the commercial side because you're not floating, you know, $3, $4, $5, $700 a month in gap. You're floating a substantially greater amount.
Hey friends, it's Kevin. I just want to thank one of our tribe members here, Lois Mans with Farmers Insurance. You know the catchy jingle. We are farmers, bump a dum bump 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 bump. Well, Lois has been covering my assets for almost 8 years now. So every time I buy a house, a flip, or a rental, Lois is there making sure everything is okay for me. She has been fantastic. Her team is highly focused on customer service. I use her a lot for all the homes, but you could also try out her life insurance, her cars, her home, her auto. She's got all those ways to help you. They are now also brokers, so they could also, if they're not the best price, they could go out and find a better price for you out there as well. So Lois, thank you so much for all that you do. And on top of all that, she is in the top 1% of all farmers agents worldwide. So amazing job, Lois. You guys need to check her out. You guys can get a hold of her at 314-283-1981. Mention me in the show and she will give you a free quote. Back to our show.
So the purchase is very, very important to make sure that you've got enough money in the budget to, accurately sustain that gap period of what vacancy could be. Also, when you're putting a commercial tenant in place, sometimes you get 3-year tenants. Most of the time it's like 5, or bigger spaces you want 7 to 10. But also you can think about that. The leasing commissions are substantially higher when you're talking about putting a 10-year tenant in, 7-year tenant in. Plus you have substantial tenant improvement costs. You're probably looking at, on the low side, $15 a foot for like carpet and paint, up to, you might be paying $50 a foot for a tenant for reasonable build out. Or you might be spending $70 a foot and then rolling a portion of that amount into their lease payments. You're kind of financing it for them. So, if their lease payment was $20 a month before, well, you might, and then they need to cover, say, $30 a foot in build out over a 5-year term. Well, they might be paying another $7 a month in rent to offset that gap over that period. So you got to be able to, the capital needs or the access to funding based on the deal is very different.
Rob, just listening to you right there, one, you have a lot of numbers and stats, right? But you sound like a CEO. You sound like somebody who makes business decisions on a higher level. You probably didn't start like that. So was any of your education or kind of, you popping into this world critical for where you are now?
Yeah. I mean, so a little bit about me. So I grew up like probably low income, lower middle class range. First person in my family to go to college. Not that that really matters for most folks, but for me it did. So I figured out a lot on the fly because didn't really know, or my family didn't really know the variables associated with it. I don't think that my family owned their first home until I was like 12, maybe, kind of a thing. So, that expertise was not there. It had to be learned outside. Went to college, didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I was fortunate to be the first member of my family to really go to college, which is cool. My family was able to do that. But beyond that, so I met some folks and became friends with a gentleman, and his dad was a developer. I went to Mizzou, University of Missouri, and his dad was a developer in Columbia. So we got to kind of, I got to see some of that stuff. Like he'd go out and help his dad, and he'd drive around and check out stuff, and we were bumming around. We didn't have much to do on, some days. So I'd see some of it. I was like, wow, this is really, really exciting. I like this. So, and then randomly through University of Missouri's business school, they had a kind of a dual major program where you could do finance and then dual emphasis in real estate, which was really cool. So I kind of stumbled into it by happenstance to some degree on that. I just thought that I was always very good with numbers. Math was always something that came to me pretty easy to me. So finance was an easy route, but it was more like financial accounting and corporate finance, and it's just not the same, right? Once you put the numbers to real estate and it was tangible, it made so much more sense. And so yeah, took those classes and learned quite a bit, through those really probably the best classes I've ever taken, from university wise. Um, so those were very hands on, kind of things, but you're still doing it from the office, right? You're analyzing the numbers and can a deal work. It really wasn't until I really did my first couple deals to realize like there is a huge, huge gap between thinking a deal works on paper and a deal actually working. At any asset type, um, and the likelihood of that happening scales up with the price point typically. So, the risk and the reward, and the amount of unknowns that you got to price into the deal. So no, it was not that always that way. I kind of figured it out as I went to some degree. Started, when I was in banking. I back up. Out of college, I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to go into development. Didn't really know. This was 2004, so there was still kind of some kind of market issues on the commercial side, kind of coming out of the kind of dot-com bubble burst and kind of 9/11 stuff. So the economy was ticking, but not, it wasn't on fire. It wasn't like 2006 before the music stopped. So kind of churned through that. I went into banking, commercial real estate finance, because I didn't quite know what I wanted to do on the real estate side. So I went to commercial real estate finance and got a really good position in Chicago where I was able to essentially work with head of Northwestern University's financial accounting program, and they put you through this like course. It's essentially like 9 months, and in the first 3 months, you take these 3 4-hour exams. If you get less than 80%, you get fired, and then they just ramrod you with deals like war room style. So I think I'd underwritten like probably $1 billion in commercial real estate, like in the first year of banking, which was really cool. Except it's still just on paper, you know. Um, then went on with that, kept doing that, and then I kept trying to buy deals on my own while I was in banking, just 2 families and 4 families. But at this point, I'm back in St. Louis. It's probably like 2006, and the economy is like the market is just booming, and it's so hard to make anything work because every 2 family or 4 family that is even close to working on a rental basis is being converted to condos. If you remember back then,
Yeah.
kind of pre-burst, and so anything that could half-ass work, they're getting flipped to condos, and so the numbers can go. People could pay way more for the asset. So it's really hard. Didn't really buy anything until 2009. I kind of luckily did not get caught with a bunch of inventory in the recession or anything. I had a condo that I bought in rehab that I moved into that was underwater, but beyond that, no real inventory. Um, and then 2009 hit and started to kind of see some deals, and then started jumping in and doing rehabs at that point, to produce excess income, just so I could have cash with the end goal of buying rentals, going that route.
So you jumped from banking to full-time real estate? Like, did you give yourself a runway, or were you just corporate world, I'm done, I'm now doing this?
No runway. So I'd probably started doing it in '09, and then I quit banking in 13.
Okay.
So about a 4-year runway. I was doing about, a couple flips a year. And then I think I was up to, don't quote me, but 15 to 18 rental units by the time I quit banking. And then I had my first child. So that was really the catalyst, because it was like I could make the banking world and managing the rentals and doing the rehabs. I can make that work. I could kind of conform my time appropriately, and I work a lot and don't sleep that much, so it's fine. Um, but but then you throw your first child in the mix, and you realize that that's kind of the variable you have to conform around. So it kind of was like, all right, well, I can't juggle all three of these with any level of success. So that was kind of the catalyst to quit banking.
Nice. I think that's good for people to know, is some of our people like jump off immediately. Hey, I think Dave O said it, like one rental doesn't change your financial life. right, for the most part. But once you get around 10, now that's some money that comes in every month. Now you have something that can help offset your W-2. Um,
It
so
can. I think the real trick there that most people don't understand is you get to 10 rentals, 15 rentals, whatever, you start to kind of get some income to offset. But in reality, there's still just capital repairs and things that come up you got to have the war chest for. So in reality, like in my world, I think you got to have substantially more than that before it really matters. But the thing that people don't talk about related to that is really the access to capital that you get once you get to that many rentals. Because if you're buying them right, and then getting them rented, you really, in any kind of reasonable market, you really should start realizing some equity reasonably quickly, especially if you're buying them right, rehabbing them, getting tenants in there. So even if you do the Burr method and you start getting your cash out, so it's not all trapped, aside from that, you still should see pretty substantial equity growth, unless you're buying into a down market, right? So I think the access to capital is the piece that people don't really realize and maybe don't utilize appropriately when they start thinking about that. Because in reality, it's like versus trying to get enough rentals to offset your W-2, it's really how do you set up enough cash aside so that you've got a year of burn if you don't make any income. Like that's the trigger point that I think that someone needs to do if they want to go off on their own, really, is literally like have a year set aside and say, okay, well, almost like retirement, right? Where it's like, okay, well, if I need $8,000 a month to live or whatever the number is for whoever, it's like, okay, well, if it's 8,000 a month, well, you need to have what, $96,000 set aside that you can just burn off of that and act like that's your paychecks coming from that. And then now you have full effort to go out and make money, right? Do activities that produce income is really the key with having to think. Cause if you try and live off the rentals, it becomes very, very difficult. And inevitably, then you're stressing out with every capital repair that comes up or every issue that comes up. And inevitably, people in that scenario, nickel and dime, duct tape stuff together, just don't put the real money into it. And then the assets depreciate or you lose quality tenants because you're not jumping on issues properly. And now you're kind of falling off while you should be kind of scaling up. So that's a big difference that I think that I look at it from a lot of folks from that degree. I think it's very important to kind of just kind of understand that. But if you get up to 10 or 15 rentals, you should have the ability to access a line of credit against the equity in those, even after a burr. And then now it's like, okay, well, getting $100,000 line of credit against the equity position. Okay, well now you've got that $96,000 that's necessary, right? So you can feed off of that. You really don't want to too terribly much, but you know that it's there, right? Okay, you've done something that's produced liquidity to be able to fund that. And then now it's like, okay, well, how quickly can you go out and build your business, do your thing, so it's starting to produce income so that you're not burning from that amount. And then as you scale up and you start getting some bigger pops, it's reimbursing that war chest so that it's still there. That's I think the real kind of model to break out.
so listening to you again, Rob, you bring up a lot of great points, and this is where I think about you by chance ran across this developer, right? Your buddy's dad or whatever that showed you Mizzou. Like there's a bigger way of doing things. How important do you think having coach and mentors or a mastermind around you really has affected your trajectory?
And probably nothing more than that. I mean, it's probably the most important single thing you can do. Um, it's very important to surround yourself with the right folks that have the trajectory that you want. But absolutely, I don't think there's anything else more important, right? It's I didn't I didn't know what I didn't know growing up. I didn't know what I didn't know going into college. I didn't really know anybody that was even like upper middle class until I went to college. Then you realize, oh, you're around a different bundle of people, and the networking amongst them and learning from that was almost, or if not more important than the actual like classwork. It's really kind of you're surrounding yourself with it's a different tier of folks. For me, at least, maybe for other people it's not the same, but for me that was the game changer. Like, oh gosh, what I thought was money was, you know, someone having a 4 or 5 bedroom house that had, finished basement. I thought that was a big deal. Right. And I get to college and I'm like, why does that kid have a G-Wagon? Like, how is that a thing? Which I didn't even know it was until I got to college. Like, it's like, what is this? How do these kids have Hummers? And then you go to a kid's house and he lives in a $3 million, 8-bedroom house. You're like, what is going on? Like, it just is a paradigm shift. Right. So that was like, not even in the mentor space, but it's just surrounding yourselves with around folks that are doing more and whether they knew it or not, but their families were. And it's like, okay, well, how are they acting? How are they doing different? And then randomly, my one buddy, whose dad was a developer, like he lived in Colombia. So we got to see it quite a bit more. And it's like, you live here? What? Like, it was 10x bigger than anybody's home that I'd ever met, So it was just such an entirely different ballgame. And it's like, oh, cool. What did you, what does your dad do? Like, what is this? Kind of a thing. And then that's how it kind of worked. But the same thing goes going to masterminds, right? Like, I've been involved in boardroom, Kent Clothier's group, for 9 years now. And it's really unique because it continually gets better. And the scale of the people that are in it, I got super lucky on that one too, because like, most of the time you're in a mastermind for a couple of years, and then you kind of, if you're working hard, you kind of grow out of the mastermind. And that is 99% of the time how it kind of works. Randomly in this instance, like, it was growing at a pace equal to or greater than my scale. And then, so I'm actually flying out there tomorrow morning, for this in San Diego for the event. But, now I'm around folks that just, one dude who was just an awesome dude, and he owned some real estate, and we hung out for, a couple of years. I knew he owned a roofing company in Ohio. Like, cool. But he just sold it for like $220 million. And he had one partner and they had no debt. So like, this guy's now doing things that are insanely different. And I'm happy to be along for the ride, because now he's dealing with stuff that I've never even thought of, and new issues and new opportunities. And it's like, okay, cool. How do I surround myself with more people like that? Because that's the trajectory that I want to go. And then what habits and practices do you have to kill in order to be able to make that transition, which is another round of difficulty. It's almost like scaling down the business that I was talking about in 2022. It's like, you got to scale down some of the shit you thought was the right way to learn or right way to do things. That's a new level. But it all comes back to your question about like surrounding yourselves with mentors and mastermind groups, and just folks that are doing what you want to do or more than you want to do, or are dealing with new things that are intriguing that you can kind of hang out with. And hopefully the other variable that's difficult there is, how do you find ways to add value to them, so you're not always the one that's taking knowledge or taking opportunities or expertise? You've got to find ways to make it worthwhile for both parties and make it a win-win, which, a lot of times you see folks that kind of fake it till they make it, but that is a tough realm. So really, it's like, cool, you got to kind of half-ass do that. But at the same time, you got to be looking at what level of expertise, or what can you do better or different or unique, or what do you see that's different than what they're doing? You can kind of add value and kind of participate in that, so that, like I said, so it's a win-win from a give and take for questions and mentorship and things. You got to figure out a way to add value.
Hey friends, it's Kevin. I just want to say thank you to great fans of Upright Construction. Greg does all my exteriors for siding, roofs, fascia, soffit, gutters, all that stuff. He is fantastic. He is on it. He works well with insurance. He works well with investors like me and homeowners. Highly personable, huge customer service. You're going to love him. Huge personality. So Greg said if you mention Kevin Dairaghi Show, that he'll knock off 10% of your labor bill. So how is that? That's fantastic. Greg is old school, so call or text Greg at 314-374-1343. And if you're going to do it upright. Back to the show.
So I love asking this question, Rob, because it's the forging moment, right? So, and I go back to a podcast we had about Eads Bridge, connecting east and west, and that was a great episode, right? But it was talking about dream, forge, and finish, right? A half finished bridge doesn't get you across the river. Without the vision of creating a bridge, they wouldn't have built one. But then the forging moment means, in this case, the building material in the late 1800s was stone, wood, and iron. And it just wasn't able to build that bridge, right? 1 in 4 bridges fall, all the stuff. What had to happen was iron needed to turn to steel. And they found out forging, which you kind of mentioned it here. So I like it. But to do that, you need heat, you need pressure, you need to take out all the impurities, right? The bad habits, and you got to add in additives, right? The healthy habits to be able to do it. And then because of steel, it was able to actually finish the bridge. Railroads and all the infrastructure came because of that hard aspect. The guy who was in charge of that was Andrew Carnegie, took his knowledge there, went to the railroads. When that was done, he took it and built an empire, right? He built all the skyscrapers in every city, right?
Yeah.
That's what some of these forging moments are. That premise, Rob, what was a forging moment for you where you were kind of in that crucible under fire and like, hey, what do I need to be able to become the guy that I want to be?
Oh, that's a good question. Wow. For
And there might have been more than one.
Yeah, I think that forging moment scales up, right? Where it's like, okay, I had to initially, I'll tell you what, I had to stop looking at every deal as a rehab. Because for me, like I'm pretty good at managing I'm good enough at managing construction. It is not my highest and best skill set. Um, But when you're first starting, you don't see that many deals. So you're looking at everything like a rehab, right? Where it's like, okay, how do I have this deal? How do I maximize the profitability? Okay, well, I take it from raw good to retail sellable and sell it retail, and that produces the most amount of income. And then I can take some of that and put it to rentals and try and do the wealth side. Um, so I had to break the concept of everything was a rehab. So, and because I could scale and move a lot quicker on the wholesale side. So even though I was only making probably 20% of what I would make rehabbing it and taking it to retail, could I do more than 5 deals in that same window in time, right? To produce the whatever net income for that. And what I realized is I was better at marketing and sales than I was at managing construction at scale to do enough projects. So then I was like, okay, well, what's the right quantity? So back then it was all right, a third, a third, a third. A third get wholesale, the third get rehab, and then third become rentals. And then inevitably as the rental portfolio grew, then we built out some property management so to manage it, because that was taking a lot of time from the other pieces, right? So that was a piece. That was a big forging moment, was realizing that. Secondarily, I think the next one related to that was transitioning from not being the acquisition guy, the person in the living rooms, to having to hire someone that was good enough to maybe meet a 80% close rate of what you would be able to do, which is very, very difficult, because at that point, just like you weren't seeing that many opportunities on houses to rehab, well, now you're seeing more opportunities, but you're not seeing an exponential amount, and they're expensive. So how do you hire someone and have the confidence and train them up so that they can do it? And then you know that you're walking away from probably a 20 to 25% less closing rate. But you've now freed up that time to be able to allocate it towards the next aspect, right? So from that point, it was scaling up, building a sales manager, going that route, and then back end, because you run into all kinds of new issues with marketing management and accounting and bookkeeping and legal and just blah, 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 right? Lining up more financing, just all the stuff associated with running a company. Then I think it was probably 2016 or so is when our first real somewhat commercial opportunity came up. And at that time, it was just a couple of houses that were zoned commercial that we were able to convert to office buildings and kind of make those pretty cool and kind of dabble in commercial a little bit and figure out how that worked. And then And then right about 6 months after that, this is the big one that changed things was I bought my first distressed note backed by commercial real estate from the bank. So that was the big game changer because this was the biggest asset that I'd done. It was a $4.1 million note. We bought it for 2.7 and some change. I had to close in 15 days, which was terrifying. And then work that, find the capital, find the debt, do the stuff really, really quickly. And then all of that just to get to the asset at a deal, which I knew the asset was a deal. Then now you're at back to real estate. So it's like, oh, wow. And it was really hard. I spent like $80,000 on legal in 2 weeks. It was crazy. But figured it out. And then it's like, okay, well, if you can do that, you can do more of these. But you had to free up some time from other things to be able to kind of churn through that. So did that, scaled that up, built a bigger commercial portfolio. Inevitably, I had to lessen some of the tasks on the residential side. And then Alec, this is probably the biggest burden that I'm at now with forging the next path is the correct time allocation, because now I should say back up a second. So as it related to that, the economy kind of shifted a little bit. Residential started to boom more. So put a little bit more focus towards that and lessen the commercial side. And then now we're kind of getting back to the point where I think the opportunity is much greater on the commercial and note purchasing side. So I'm kind of making the transition to spending a lot more time on that front and trying to develop the teams and systems to lessen my involvement much greater on some of the residential stuff. That's kind of that. This is a new forging moment that, hell, I don't know, 6, 9, 12 months. We can talk about it again and see where it shakes.
See, that's kind of fun. So how is AI playing a role in this new iteration? Have you started using it? Are you not?
Yeah, we're using it. I mean, it's easier to collect data. It's easier to kind of manage and monitor, inside sales, phone monitoring. Easier to have kind of follow-ups on protocol for systems for that. But I would say a little bit easier for some of the bookkeeping and automation on like the kind of CRM and lead management side. But we're probably not utilizing as much as we could at this realm, but definitely something that is being reviewed in pretty good detail. But so I think the simple plug and play stuff we're using it quite a bit. I think it could expand on the lead management and kind of process management, cleaning up the systems, making sure all the T's are dotted and I's are crossed, and kind of analyzing things. I don't quite know exactly what it will relate to on the commercial and note buying side just yet, besides, like all the stuff I just said, basic follow-ups, lead management, touching, things like that.
Well, yeah, data collection. It does a great job.
Yeah. Yeah. But I would say, I feel like I don't know what I don't know on that front, but I feel like there is substantially more that it could do that we're not touching on yet, besides data collection, low level, mid level, lead management, follow up, touching, you know, um, spreadsheet stuff, accounting stuff. But
So, Rob, with all this stuff that you've learned, like you really are talking high level here, which I think is fantastic. With all of the stuff that you've been kind of groomed into being now, if you could go back to young Rob and give advice to him as he's breaking into his first one or two houses, still as a banker, like this young moldable guy, what kind of advice would you have given your past self? Like, how could you have, is there a direction or is there something you would have told yourself?
yeah, I mean, it would be think bigger and really analyze limited beliefs, where it's kind of like, then I was like, oh my God, 100 rental units, that'd be insane. I can't even imagine that. And then, doing enough rehabs to produce X amount of money and have a team. And like, that seemed crazy. No one that I knew really that closely had done that to a big level. Right. And the very few that had felt too far away, or like, it was more than hard work that got them there. And in reality, it probably, I mean, inevitably the harder you work, the luckier you get. That always is the case, right? But it really just comes down to learning the skill set, surrounding yourself with the people that have been there and just going. So I think like maybe thinking a little bit bigger and having a more strategic plan to get there, and then not letting the limited beliefs kind of creep in, and having the protocol of knowing when they are, identifying them, and kind of jumping on how to get past it. I think it's a big piece. Secondarily, I think like it's trying to set up the systems or capital base or whatever it might be so that you're not looking at needing to do XYZ for the immediate income, and making it so that you can evaluate it from a little bit higher level opportunity, where it's kind of like you kind of say, all right, well, I need to develop the systems and protocols and whatever so that it can reasonably replicate some level of income or produce a big enough war chest that I'm not thinking about the assets solely on an income basis. I'm thinking about like, what's the right strategy for it, or what's the right strategy for the business, not, oh my God, I need to do 50 more wholesales because I want to make this much money. It'd be like, because what we found is like we can make the amount of money that we'd make on 50 or 75 wholesales, can make that on one commercial deal that's the right deal, or even one big rehab, one multifamily rehab. You can make that amount on one deal if you really have the strategy and the kind of the knowledge to really kind of look at it the right way, and not kind of get caught up on the small things, and have a little bit, be able to pull yourself up a little bit higher and kind of look at it from a 10,000-foot kind of strategic view.
Falls in line with that vision concept. Awesome. All right. So we have these big forging moments, right? But there's all these little ones that we go through in a given day, week, month, year, right? There's these little cruxes that we have to battle. When you are going through one of these forging moments, which could be when it snows or any of these things that you're doing, is there a book? Is there a poem? Is there a quote? Is there like the image that you have on your wall, just do it? Is there something you go to that's kind of, you're like, all right, get off your ass, let's go do it, even though some days you don't want to? Is there something you go and kind of cling to for that?
Yeah. I mentioned Kent Clothier a few times. He's one of my biggest mentors. One of the things that he says that just rings through my head is like, this is where most people quit. That really hits me every time, where it's like, dude, this problem is big. It's hard. This is awful. Why did I have to deal with this? Like, you can get on the train of like, this only happens to me bullshit, like just all the super negative self-talk. And the thing that snaps me out of that is like, this is where most people get tripped up. This is where most people quit. And there's only one way to get past it. You just have to bear down, figure it out, and just fucking do it. There's no one coming to save you. There's no easy button. And the answer is just get in and whack as many moles as you can, and just hack away at it, and then learn as much as you can along the way, and then make sure at the end of the chaos and all that BS is that you spend a little bit of time kind of debriefing so that you can make it that you don't make those same problems again. Because more times than not, like the stress and the negative self-talk and the anger that you have of yourself is like because you knew that you shouldn't have done that thing, or you knew you should have jumped on that problem sooner, and you let it fester and grow, and now it feels bigger. And it's because it's like, if it's just a new problem you just have to roll up your sleeves and figure out, that's one thing. But if it's a problem that's already happened once and you're pissed at yourself for not addressing it correctly or not doing the right task, it feels way bigger, and now it's like, well, why didn't you do that? You're fighting yourself and the problem. So I really, really kind of think about those two things, right? This is where most people quit, and you're not going to quit, and you're going to figure it out. And then really making sure that you're doing the right thing, so you're not consistently getting hit with the same problem and making the stress level of any situation so much greater. And I still fall into the trap. Don't get me wrong, but that's what works.
I'll tell you, that's great advice right there, Rob. And then I just have to ask, because everybody's curious, when you were named best hair in real estate, how has that affected your life?
Oh, it affects me none. Oh man, it's one of those funny things that that people talk about a lot, but I literally don't even think about it because my hair is such chaos to try and like just get it to be somewhat tame. That literally every day I'm like, I do it, and then hairs are out of place, and then I just cut them off. That's how it works.
Done.
That's it. It's like, oh, that one's out, cut. I mean, you probably see it right here. It's like these ones are sticking out, cut them. That's it. Easy as that. I literally care zero, but it's funny. It's a funny little task.
So what's funny is I have some tenants, they called me up and they're like, "Oh, honey, I just saw you on the TV." I'm like, "No, you didn't." Like, I think they think we're the same person. I'm like, if you look closer, pretty sure we're not. I thought
Yeah,
that was
like, I
funny
haven't
though.
shaved this beard in a while, and that guy's pretty clean. Oh, that's
So,
funny. If I could grow a beard like that, we'd look a lot more similar.
well, I got a few more wisdom streaks here than you do, but yeah, we'll get there. Rob, it's been great just chatting with you. I tell you, like, it really, more than anything, just kind of debriefing you here, it really does sound like I just interviewed a CEO in real estate.
Oh, thank you.
It's fantastic, man. I like what you're doing. The scaling up part, I never thought about one of the harder parts could be the scaling down. I think that's fascinating. That's great.
Yeah,
Cool.
just don't let it be a limited belief to scaling. Just be prepared for it. You know, kind of create your what if scenario with as things go bad. It's like, what would you do first? What would you do second? What would you do third? You know, we always kind of had that. 2022 was unique because we scaled up so quickly that we didn't have the what strategies it looked like scaling down, and it made it a lot harder.
Mm.
So I think as you're scaling up, if you can just think through how the process went as you scaled up and how would you bring it back down, and then what would have to happen if you absolutely had to bring payroll and expenses down to half, and just think through that in advance and just have rough bullet points. It makes it so that you can kind of start on second when inevitably it's going to have to happen. There's market real estate cyclical and shit's coming.
When I look at some of this, I think of two shoulders, right? You have your Dave Ramsey, like cut expenses, pay everything off, live debt free, and then you have your Grant Cardone, F that, just 10 times, you know, 10 times your sales, we'll figure it out. It's one of those like, which one of these do you go with? It's not like the devil and the angel, but they're two different ideas towards debt and where to start in business. So I thought that's always fun.
No, it's great. I think about that very often. I mean, I'll tell you what, it is difficult to be a speculative real estate guy having been in banking for 10 years, especially been in banking through the recession, the big recession, right? Like it's a thing that I think about very often. It's like, okay, well, the opportunity is here. How hard do you press? How do you mitigate risk as it relates to that to kind of help offset that? What do you do if it does take twice as long to lease up? What do you do if it does take twice as much construction? Do you have access to additional debt? Do you need to bring in more capital? Are you into the deal right that you can afford to sell off some capital? Like I think about that very, very often. And I think it's a great way to look at it. David Ramsey's scenario, which people ask me about a ton, a lot of times it's, well, yes, he got whacked. He was highly leveraged. But on the other side, so he looked at it as like, all right, well, I'm going to create this thing that produces a ton of income. Then I'm going to buy debt. I'm going to buy real estate debt free, which is a strategy, but it is very, very difficult to scale that unless you have substantial income. And I think there's things to be said about it. It's like, okay, well, maybe you just do that. There are downsides to that because if you don't have hard assets behind a big income production business and times get bad and you have to scale back down, it's very nice to have assets and access to those assets for liquidity to help bridge gaps. And that's the difference from a lot of companies failing or having to totally close up versus having access to be able to float out windows so that you can properly scale down.
Dude, Rob, again, buddy, thank you so much for jumping on. I hope you enjoy your flight to San Diego tomorrow. It really has been great chatting with you on this stuff. So, man, much success to you, and we'll see you around soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's been great.
All right. Well, you're back with the second best hair in real estate here in St. Louis. I'll give Rob the number one there. So hopefully you guys love that one. I thought it was great. But I thought it was fun that today happened to be a snow day in St. Louis. And Rob and his dad got a little bit of a start with the snow removal process in their construction company. So I thought it was fantastic finding out he was the first of his family to go to college, and then the experiences outside of the classroom were some of the more important things than what was in the classroom, which totally agree with that. Scaling is hard, but you need to do it. And one of the things I liked he said multiple times in different ways was you just figure it out. You get in there and you figure it out. Bad things happen, guess what? Figure it out. Good things happen, guess what? Figure it out. You need to do those EOBs, end of action reports, right? That kind of just help you get better at the end of it. I really thought it was great. A deal on paper isn't necessarily the same as it is in real life. You know, the reality that some of those are like that. The ability to borrow as you're building your rentals up, how to borrow and structure that money, right? The equity to be able to go do other things, whether it's capital improvement, whether it's buying another house. When you're getting into coaching and masterminds, how can you add value to that group? Um, I think that's because everybody just wants to take and just suck, but it's really how can you add value? What can you bring to the table? Think of the Go Giver, think of Giftology or Beyond Gift. You know, like what can you do to increase that relationship? That was great. Um, I thought it was his forging moments was learning how to back down as the rehabber, right? Understanding it's maybe not run as efficiently as I am, but hey, it lets me do other things. And then learning to back down as a buyer, like, hey, uh, they'll probably close 80% of what I would have closed, but it's still better because I get to work on these other pieces. Talk about just bigger thinking, right? Um, his advice about thinking bigger, right? The limiting beliefs. He would have focused earlier on the mindset stuff, which is a big component of what we talk about here. And then I like what he said. Kent Cuther said, "This is where most people quit." It's like, oh man, what a cool way to make you keep going. You know, say you heard it, this you're scared, it's not uncomfortable. Guess what? This is where most people quit. Well, you, my friend, are not most people, and we are going to continue and succeed. So, guys, thank you for jumping on, and we'll see you next week. Hey friends, this is Kevin. For more information for our vendors, just go to our link tree or any of these little clicks here. You could get it. I'm going to finish you off with some positive affirmations so you could get ready for your day. I am a leader. I make a difference. I add value. My words have power. I know God and He loves me. I am a leader. I raise people up, not tear them down. Today is my best day. I change lives. I live abundantly. I am a money magnet. I am alive, and I am a force for good. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and remember, dream big, act accordingly.